groove in.
Hello, Manu.
Hi, Mo. Here we are again. I'm welcoming you back to Germany.
Thanks.
Because Mo used to stay in sunny Portugal for a 2 weeks holiday or 3 weeks?
2.5.
2.5 weeks. And I was quite jealous. But now you're back here, back to autumn.
Back to sunny Munich.
Actually, it's sunny today.
It's literally 15 degrees colder than in Portugal.
Yeah, that is the main difference.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We're back, and while I was away, something happened. SideFX released Houdini 19.
Yes, and everybody was quite excited about this, including us too.
Yes, although I must admit that I struggled at first to find the points in the new release that got me revved up.
Really?
Yeah, because lots of it was focused on what appeared to me to be big studio workflows. So KineFX, which is brilliant and which admittedly also is for more of a small studio and freelancers. It's accessible to them as well. But lots of it was based on a character workflow. So we had KineFX, we had fur and hair workflows.
Well, but that was, I think they overhauled the entire Vellum thing and made it into a universal solver where you now can have
I'll get to that. They were also, like in a beta version, they had, I think, new tissue solvers, so for muscles, but that I think is still beta. And then let's get to the interesting stuff. Yes, they overhauled or they added to Vellum. So now Vellum has fluid support as well. So
and I think that is what we are seeing here. In the graphics, maybe.
That is exactly what we're seeing here.
Yeah, okay. To be honest, this got me excited because they used to have this grain fluid node before.
Yeah.
And it was for whitewater only back in the day. And I just thought, well, because I read the original XPBD paper and it included fluids. That's what I thought, why I thought, well, give it a try. Maybe I can come up with some fluids because, you know, I usually don't need very realistic fluids. It's just like GUI behavior.
Yeah.
But it was not suitable for that. It was fast like hell, but it was not really suitable for creating fluid surfaces.
And then in between we had the pop fluids, which was very well suited for small scale liquids, but then again was not really a native Vellum constraint. So I think, yeah, that's there now.
Nice.
And also,
so, you spent a lot more time with the Houdini 19 release than I did because my term just started and I'm quite busy right now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But I would have liked to spend more time with Houdini 19 than I did. So now we are here and I'm eagerly awaiting information from your side.
So not only do we have Vellum fluids now, Vellum also has, I think that even came in 18.5 in some intermediate update release, that they have a constraint that is there to get you to a rigid-ish behavior. So we're trying to match the relative position of points within a given geometry while we're simulating. So we're kind of getting away from Vellum only being able to simulate soft bodies, blobby, gooey, wobbly stuff.
But wait a second. Does that mean that we now can have floating boxes in a Vellum in a Vellum fluid that, I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, they're
disintegrate and into sand.
Break apart. Yeah.
And, well, that's great, actually.
It gets to a unified solver and it gets to the position or to the point that we've always wanted it to be, namely including every single one and all of the XPBD constraints that we saw in the papers, because XPBD is just that, a really fast, let's call it plausible unified physics solver. So Vellum is getting to that point. And then...
Yeah. Do you actually remember Saftimage XSI?
No, I never used it.
Because back then they had a solver like that.
Yeah.
That was point-based and simulated pretty much everything, like rigid bodies and fluids and everything. It was just slow like hell.
Okay. I mean, speed-wise, it depends. I mean, Vellum is, let's call it interactive. It's not real-time. I mean...
Yeah, of course it's not real-time. I mean, if you look at this simulation here, nobody expects this to be real-time. Or am I mistaken?
I wouldn't expect it to be real time, no. But sometimes you could get the impression by the games demos you see of NVIDIA and the likes that this is supposed to be running on real time.
Yeah, let's wait another 5 years. Probably it will eventually be real time.
Yeah, it might be. No, but we have that.
And that is really exciting, at least to me, because, as you know, I'm usually not after super realistic stuff coming out of the ocean.
Yeah.
And I always found flip fluids to be very nice, but it just took too long to simulate for my personal taste.
Absolutely.
So having a solver that is unified and probably a little faster to do motion graphic key-like effects is a huge improvement, at least for me.
Absolutely. And I like that SideFX actually puts lots of effort into maintaining and updating Vellum and not just implementing it once and just leaving it there. So,
and that is something you can say about a lot of areas of Houdini.
Absolutely.
Of course, you cannot update everything, but at least SideFX is one of the few companies that really maintain stuff instead of inventing new stuff every time, leaving the gaps unsolved.
I mean, there are corners of the program where you could argue it was about time that, well, maybe now a bit of maintenance would be due, but I mean, you have limited resources, of course.
Yeah.
So that's Vellum. That's one of the things that I really liked. The other big or major thing that they released or updated, maintained is Karma again. Karma and Solaris, that is. So I like actually that it seems that SideFX has realized that the USD workflow as such as it was implemented so far posed some problems for a certain user group. Let's put it that way.
Solaris, you mean?
Yeah, Solaris. What did I say?
Yeah.
So I think out of the studios, out of the areas where you have a TD, lighting TD, rendering TD, wrapping your head around USD has been a challenge. And I think SideFX addressed that and realized that, and by now made it way easier for single freelancers, small studios, folks like you and me who don't want to dive into the intricacies of USD and the specification to just, quote unquote, get their geometry lit and rendered out.
Yeah, that is what I found. I really tried to dive deep into USD, and I actually quite liked it, to be honest. I think it's a very smart system, and it's very powerful. And what I get Solaris. I get the point of Solaris. Putting a procedural graph on top of the structure of USD is a very smart thing because it enables you to do insanely complicated stuff easily or with a little effort compared to where you go without that.
Yeah.
But to just render your sphere with a shader, it's a little overkill. And
absolutely,
especially because you have to have all this specialized USD knowledge, like how do they call their stuff, and you have a second nomenclatura where you just have to remember how everything goes. And of course, as you said, if you are a lighting TD and you do this on a daily basis, it's not a problem at all. Yeah. But if you just want your stuff rendered, it's... So what changed?
Let me just reiterate what you said and mention one thing that didn't change and which still kind of drives me nuts, is that by default, when you import your geometry into USD, that is into Solaris, your UV coordinates, UV, gets renamed to ST. That is just the beauty of it. So what changed, I think, under the hood...
RenderMan is raising his ugly...
Yeah, and you're really thinking, wow, why on earth would you?
Because history?
Yeah, and history is, of course, important when you're inventing something new, right? So you can get rid of all the conventions and unify it. No. Okay, don't get me into that. So what's new? Well, I think under the hood, lots of convenience nodes, so lots of the automatic translation, automatic conversion of Houdini's Geo and OBJ context into USD, along with some convenience nodes such as the scene import, which just takes everything you have in your OBJ context, imports it,
and works
reliably-ish into Solaris. It works most of the time. Of course, you get awkwardness when you, for example, want to adjust the camera afterwards. So Solaris just creates lots of edit lobs that just pick out your camera,
change the transforms,
and then rewrites that back into USD. But in generally, it's a quick and hacky-ish and, in my opinion, kind of successful way if you have a small scene and just want to render that out quickly.
Give me some details about this. So does that mean it is supposed to work like this if you just quickly want to have some shaded results? Or is it actually possible to just do away with Solaris and work in OBJ context as ever and then just convert it over and that's it?
That's basically both is possible. And they even developed this a bit further with the Karma ROP. So if you want to stick to your old school workflow, what you could do is just in your ROP, in your rendering context, where you usually set up your Mantra or your Redshift, Octane, whatever, you can drop down a Karma ROP, and what that does is basically it's just an HDA built around the scene import all, and it just creates your LOPS network, just imports everything, and just opens up a second viewport where you can just light and shade using Karma. However, I found that particular node to be a bit unreliable. So it has update issues. There's no decent way to get a clean restart if something happens, so you just have to delete the node, redrop it. So what I like to do rather is go into LOPS and just use the scene import all, or even your traditional SOP imports, and set up the scene there. I mean,
but that's where it's getting interesting, because I can probably draw from your experience. Even if we have these tools now, it might be still advised to learn at least a little Solaris to
absolutely
build your scene there.
Just the bare basics. But the beauty is with the status that Solaris is at currently, it is possible to learn that bits of Solaris that you need within 10-15 minutes.
Yeah.
You need to know how you import geometry. You need to know how to create a material and how to assign a material and how to set up your rendering engine, and that's it.
Okay. But that means although we have now a workaround solution sort of for sticking to the old workflow, it is not really intended. It's more like, please use Solaris, and only if you just can't, then use that.
I think it is intended, but it's just like it's still in a beta state. Karma ROP, I think. It just needs a bit of maintenance.
Okay. Well, I really have to dive into this again and see where it went from when I looked at it, and that was before the initial release. So I think a lot of things changed.
And that brings me to Karma.
Karma. I was eagerly awaiting Karma on the GPU. Tell me something about Karma.
Well, it's XPU, so it tries to use your CPU and your GPUs.
Actually, okay. Didn't know that it's using all the resources.
It is Optix, and Optix is running on your CPU and on your GPU.
Okay.
However, you need an NVIDIA GPU with the correct driver, which of course is not the oldest and not the newest one.
As always. The big problem is not that. The big problem is that other programs have specifications too. Yeah, and it's really hard to find a driver that works for
fits every one of them.
CyclesX and KarmaX GPU and capturing reality and Metashape, and everything should run, and that's most of the time the issue.
So on the one hand, let's not dive into XPU directly, but let's discuss the standard Karma bit. And SideFX now claims it's production ready and has reached feature parity with Mantra, which I think is an exaggeration because, it has most of the features are there on parity, but especially the very interesting features of why you would want to use Mantra or why you'd want to use a SideFX built render engine over a third-party rendering are not there.
That is?
Volume procedurals. That is one of the main things why I would stick to Karma or why I would stick to Mantra, and I can't stick to Karma because it doesn't offer it yet. That being said, so far what I've tested in Karma really feels solid. It feels like it's come a long way from the first releases, and it feels like a production-ready-ish render engine. I mean, when we compare it to what we described as production-ready when we first used Octane or Redshift, I mean, of course, it's faster. It's further than that. But still, it's not 100% feature parity with Mantra, I think.
Okay, but most of the time you're getting along because...
98% of what you're doing in production is there.
Are not necessary most of the time. What about...
so XPU.
GPU version.
XPU and GPU.
XPU, sorry.
I mean, SideFX themselves deliberately declared it as an alpha tech preview. And if SideFX does so, you know what that means.
Yes.
Because I think even Karma, the standard version, when it was first out, which they described as a beta, should have been labeled as that. And it feels a bit like back when Karma, the first version, came out. Just that the management of expectations is better this time, I think. And also, compared to Karma, it is really fast, especially when you look at refractions, caustics in refractive material.
That's, of course, the most interesting part. How does it compare speed-wise, features aside, to something like Redshift or Octane?
Okay, so to KarmaXPU, it's ages faster. It's just, orders of magnitude faster. Compared to Redshift or Octane, it's slow.
Okay.
It doesn't match that speed. Especially, it has an issue when updating the VRAM. So it needs hell of a lot of time until you have your first pixel from the GPUs. From the CPU, it's fast, so that's the advantage. I mean, it starts rendering on the CPU because it can access RAM directly. But until your GPUs kick in, it takes quite a lot of time. So until you have all the shaders and all the geometry transferred to your GPUs, that takes a lot of time.
Wait a moment. That means it starts rendering immediately, but only on the CPU,
Right.
and then in the background tries to put all the data on the GPU.
Right.
As soon as it manages to do so, then the GPUs start rendering.
They kick in, yeah.
That means it's fast.
Yeah, slow, and then boom, it's there, yeah.
Okay.
Which can be a bit irritating if you are not used to that behavior.
Yeah.
And then it being alpha, it lacks a few features which I would have liked to see in even a first version of a rendering, such as particle rendering. So it doesn't render particles as points. You have to instance onto your points to render particle, and then it doesn't do instance colors, so it cannot access instance attributes.
Well, okay, it's an alpha version.
It's an alpha
It
version.
will come.
Yeah. But that's the status of it. I would urge everyone to give it a try for a built-in render engine that just ships with Houdini by default. It is quite amazing and it's quite fast. Of course, or not of course, but currently it just can't match with the speed of third-party render engines. But let's see how and where that goes, I'd say.
Yes, because I would love to just use Karma, to be honest. Because, again, he's talking about Blender. I really like about Blender that the render engine just ships with the software.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I don't have to install and manage plugins, and of course don't have to pay extra. And I would really love to use Karma.
Yeah.
So let's see where this goes. I will give it a try, and maybe next version lifts this to beta.
Maybe, let's hope. One more thing that I would like to add there is that with KarmaXPU specifically, you should be using the new MaterialX system, because everything else is kind of unreliable and took me quite some time to figure out and bug fix.
Okay, worried about MaterialX. That is, to me, another very important feature. And if I get it right, MaterialX is, again, open standard for transferring materials between engines, right?
That is what I understand, yeah.
So it is actually quite amazing. We never had something like this before. And USD can package different shaders into the USD archives, which is nice, but it's still different shaders of different engines. And now MaterialX tries to come up with a standard solution for this. Did you use it already?
Yes.
And what do you say?
So, I mean, just use it with KarmaXPU and XPU, and with that, it's amazingly straightforward. It reminds me a lot of the material systems that we're used to from Redshift and Octane, to be honest.
So it's high level.
High level-ish. I mean, you also have your low level nodes, and that's the irritating thing. So when you're building procedural shaders using your standard vector math, you have to stick to the MaterialX vector math. And that just cost me like an afternoon or so, realizing that I can't just use the standard VOP add to add vectors together, but I have to use the MaterialX vector add.
Okay. Good to know. Important information.
Yeah. So I think it sits somewhere in between a fine-grained shader builder toolkit and a high-level thing. It brings both with it. So it brings its own standard shader, which you can widely adopt, but which you can also use on its own, and which is really high level. It also brings the Disney BRDF and BxDF as a shader.
But that to me actually sounds really exciting.
Yeah,
because I seldomly use the power of Mantra. Of course, again, not a big studio workflow. I totally get that people love and need to write their own shaders, but in a freelance environment, that's seldomly needed. And having a mid-level shading system where you just wire together BSDFs is something that I really appreciate.
Yeah,
sounds great. Do you know anything about MaterialX support in other engines?
In one tutorial, I stated that Unreal supports it. Apparently, it doesn't support it yet. It's just been announced somewhere or on the roadmap. I don't know, but I got that from someone. So I should check my sources next time.
Yes.
But rumor has it that Unreal is going to support it at some point, and that's all I know.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I will have a look, because that's really interesting to me. What about MaterialX? Because if this could be a standard like USD or Alembic in the future, and you could just define your materials in one language and use it everywhere, that would be just so great.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Let's hope for it.
Yeah.
Apart from that, let me just have a look at the list you pulled up here, if there's anything that I gave a test try. I mean, of course, I tried finding my notes in modeling and geometry, and there was one that stuck out to me, which I have used in 2 tutorials, which is a bit weirdly named the attribute fill, which just interpolates attributes across a mesh. And the interesting thing
here is a little note
just
about
a
it.
tiny note about attrib fill that it's new.
And what does it do?
It interpolates attributes across a mesh, and it has a bunch of really interesting algorithms. So not only can it blur out an algorithm to fill patches of a mesh where the algorithm isn't for some reason, but it also can use and solve the Poisson and the Iconol equations to fill. So you could either use it with the Iconol equation, which just calculates the arrival time of an attribute at a given point. You could use it to find shortest paths. And with the Poisson equation, you, for example, can use it to build minimal surface, which is really quick. So just interpolate the P position attribute from a boundary which is fixed, and just interpolate that using the Poisson equation, solve that using the Poisson equation for the rest of your mesh.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
And
we have
Bezier
handles.
Yeah, I mean, SideFX rightfully is a bit proud of those. We can now finally use a curve drawing tool to draw curves. Have a really nice round edges, round corners tool in there. And I think the main takeaway is not that you are finally able to draw curves, but that SideFX is putting a bit more emphasis on viewport tools and viewport handles.
Okay, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so even that.
That is, I mean, then within Pyro and Flip Fluids, you have a few nodes that make the GPU-based solver, especially the minimal OpenCL solver, which is capable of running interactive to real-time, depending on your volume solution. You now have the possibility to animate its centers. So now if you have, for example, the canonical example they have is some character running with a torch. Before that, you would have just like a giant volume to sim that, because the torch just travels through that volume, and now you can just animate the center point of the volume and stick to a rather small volume and thus remain interactive or even real-time.
But that's a big one.
That's cool, yeah. Bunch of quality of lifetime improvements.
But there's one feature that I actually tried out, and I think, to me, it is the bestest feature.
Tell me.
Of this release, and that is licensing.
Oh, yeah.
Because now you can use SideFX.com as your license server, and that means that you can put your license online, and no matter what client machine you are using, you can just pull the license online. Like all the others do. And that means, because I'm traveling a lot currently, because I'm working in a different city. I have my laptop, and when I'm over there, I can just pull the license there, work there. When I'm returning home to my standalone PC, I can pull the license there. It's a biggie to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I used it when I was away on vacation to record some of the release tutorials,
Yes.
and it was just easy.
Thank you, SideFX, for making this possible. Yeah. It's really fantastic.
Absolutely. Oh, and one thing that we maybe should touch before we close this. We received a comment underneath our Nerd Rant where we discussed if it makes sense to render within Houdini or to export it.
Yeah.
And they claim that now with Houdini 19 and with Karma, we need to re-record this. I don't think that we need to really re-record this. It just emphasizes the direction into which Houdini is going. And my tendency to stay within Houdini even gets stronger with that and not to use another tool like export to Blender, Cinema 4D, Max Maya, whatever, to render out.
I mean, to be honest, that would be the perfect world where you can just do everything inside of Houdini.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've got a bit to go until we arrive there, but
we get some steps closer.
Some baby steps, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mo, for this wrap up. It looks like a very solid release. A lot of interesting stuff to test out in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my first point where to look into it is probably the Karma rendering.
Yeah, that's definitely a fun one to start with.
Interesting to me.
All right, so let's close this. And yeah, I guess...
Let me say it. It's cheers.
And goodbye.
Goodbye, folks.
See you. Cheerio.
Till next time.